Welcome back to another episode of the Funeral Babe podcast, where we have all the really difficult conversations that are super awkward and kind of weird to talk about because nobody taught us how to have them. And for those of you who don't know me, my deepest condolences. I'm Melissa, Undertaker Funeral Director and a Funeral Babe.
Yes, you are.
I did it good there, right? I did go with that entrance. Yeah. I thought about it.
Love the intro.
Thank you.
My name is Christina. I am your average, stay-at-home mom.
You always do that when you're talking.
I'm trying to think of something because that was so good. But anyways, I'm just here to really ask the questions and get the education that I think everybody is, and to get more comfortable with talking about it. And I think I really am getting a lot more comfortable with talking about.
No, you are. You call me and you're like, yes, I was talking to this guy about like dying before. I'm like, okay, this is my type of conversation.
Yeah, no, it's comforting, and it's nice when like the person on the other end is interested in the conversation. You get to know people. It's
pick some brains, get into the real deep conversations.
Yeah.
Which so today's topic is, I think, possibly very much a little maybe controversial. I don't know. We're going to see. But I love this for us. But it is a very big topic, and it absolutely has to do with death care. It has to do with dying. It has to do with life. Can you guess?
It's not funerals.
Healthcare.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fire topic.
Pretty much right before the funeral.
Your whole life, right before the funeral, all of it. Healthcare is a big topic. And one thing that I want to say right off the top too is obviously being a funeral director, and this is something I did not realize either when I was getting into the industry, like just a thought I didn't have, and nobody told me, obviously first generation funeral directors, no one mentioned it to me, but you don't realize how much you see end of life in the funeral home itself, and the healthcare stories you hear, and the hospitals you're going to, and the nursing homes you're going to, the continued hospices, like you get a good bird's eye view into healthcare just from being a funeral director and hearing about it and the stories. And there is a lot to know. There's a lot to think about. It was, for me, what I would call a lot of rapid aha moments, and also being in like my 20s. It's things that I realize my friends and, peers probably won't think about until many, many years from now.
Retirement age.
Yeah, when you have to worry about your parents and things like that. And in some cases, my friends have gone through it now, from then to now. And like for you and your case, you've lost somebody, you didn't have to go through, a whole system of healthcare. But it's such a big topic. And I want to kind of just dive into it. A lot of it.
Let's jump in. Yeah, got my slimmies on. Let's do it. What you got?
Let's go. Okay, first things first. And this is something that is the biggest thing that I looked at when I started seeing it, is caregiving, taking care of your family, your parents. And this doesn't just fall under any umbrella topic. For me, I would think in a lot of case scenarios would be parents, right? As your parents get older and they need more help at home, when the quality of life, because yes, we are living longer, baby. We are, our age is definitely, we're living longer, but our quality of life, how many people can, how many years do you need constant care, depending on what's ailing you and the illnesses that are happening.
Okay.
So, somebody with dementia per se, you need a lot of care. You need maybe home care. As your parents get older, can they toilet themselves? Can they clean? Can they cook? Mm-hmm. What do you do?
Go to the doctor's appointments, all that. Like, you
to remind them to take their medications, and all the different things. And then as children, or doesn't always have to be children, friends, family members, being the caregiver. These are all things that like, maybe I'm not saying to obsess over, but it's something to consider and think about. And that's why I think that having the difficult conversations are so important, because there's a lot of scenarios that play into place. And I think that one thing people also don't realize is the cost of healthcare. Like say it for what it is.
Yeah.
Call it for what it is.
We all know it. It's a complete and utter mess. And I could go into this very, very. We could dive into this.
Oh, because it is a deep rabbit hole when you think about it.
Yeah, I've researched and I've worked on, in past jobs, and it's.
Like, because now I know exactly what you're thinking. And you're like, I'll start it off. Like, you go to some of these nursing homes. First of all, healthcare and end of life care. From what I know, people I know, I'm not calling any geographical area, but to give the audience some kind of idea here, is if you were to have to put your loved one in a nursing facility or an assisted living facility, somewhere where they would need care, you're talking 10, 13, 15,000, maybe some places 6,000, depending, but you're talking $1,000 a month to care for somebody. Having healthcare at home, 24/7 healthcare, you're talking a lot of money. If you don't have the time to be there because you have to work, then who pay? So you have all this cost, which is crazy. So nursing homes is obviously a big option. We fall also into, which we'll get to this, your Medicaid and your Medicare, right? So
that's where I'm going to go at is
where you qualify. And that actually is a funeral thing. So, where people, in a lot of times, and it's something to also think about, just consider, roll it around, have the conversation. When you get older, if you have money and you have assets and you have a home, or whatever you may have money in the bank, you got lots of money in the bank, and you fall sick and you need this help, you have to pay for it.
Yeah. And
the healthcare system will take all of your assets besides, let's say, you have protected assets. I'm not going to get into legalities here. I am not a lawyer or a financial advisor by any means. I am just an undertaker from New York. That's very clear. But they will,
more than an undertaker from
just
New
more
York.
than that. But they can, they'll all of your cash, because why, you have to pay it. You're paying for your healthcare. There's also a loophole in the funeral world, okay, especially, I'm sure this is nationwide, definitely New York, but I'm pretty sure it's nationwide, where you can qualify, you can put some money into a funeral trust account. So it's irrevocable. The money's got to be spent on the funeral.
Okay.
And it protects that money so that when you're spending down basically all of your money on your health care, there's money set aside for a funeral that was protected, that they can't touch. Yeah. And that's why usually with as parents get, parents or old grandparents get older, they get elder care attorneys if they have assets, just to see what they could protect, their houses. They put things into trust so that also it's not a mess when someone dies trying to probate the will and all of these things. It just makes things a little easier. But with healthcare, and then so back to the whole thing with nursing homes, which was where you were getting at, and Medicaid, and you end up where who's going to accept the insurance, right? And you go to these places, and I see it repeatedly. I've walked into plenty of nursing homes over and over again, and it's somewhere where I would say, I cannot believe
they would send their parent here.
Somebody's going to be here. But in the same exact position, same level of empathy, as I understand how people end up here. I've been in positions taking care of family way too many times. We have scathed death in my family many times. This close, tested all of my patients. But we've dealt with these types of things, and rehab facilities. So medical rehab facilities, when someone maybe has a very serious injury or goes through something so traumatic where they need to learn how to walk, whatever. So dealing with those facilities, you don't really get a lot of choices. They give you a list, you call in, and it's what takes your insurance.
It takes your insurance, yep.
And who they're going to take you.
Yeah.
And so, some of these nursing homes and stuff, you don't get to pick.
No.
It's the one that's on the list.
And your insurance for, especially the rehab centers, are only good for a certain amount of days. I don't know.
It's usually some of them are 21 days, 30, and then you have
45 days. And they're like, all right, goodbye. Good, see you. Have fun.
You got to go home now, figure it out. Call up, yep, we're sending a ma home with you, but she can't walk and she can't toilet herself, and we're going to send rehab there for 1 day a week. What?
But even the nursing homes, they're so either understaffed or poorly paid. The quality of staffing, is affecting these patients.
It's wild.
So
To me, it is very sad. It's one of those things too where it is the high cost of it to mention. And I don't know what the ratio is when it comes to, nursing home laws and all those other things. But in a lot of cases, too, you have one registered nurse to an entire floor of patients.
Yeah.
With all different types of, and people, and it's expensive.
Yeah.
And then what's your option, though? You can bring your loved one home, but now can you provide that type of care?
Exactly.
Do you have the time?
Yeah.
Most of us, the average American, I'm not saying we're doing fine. We're just getting by. A lot of us are just rolling by. I'm not, but to just be able to, hey, I'm not going to go to work and I'm going to be home and take care of my parents all day. It's not ideal.
No.
And then also the caregiving position, when you fall into being a caregiver over being a daughter or being a sister or being, that form of grief.
So what do you mean? If you're being their caregiver, you kind of lose that? I don't think you lose
I
it.
think when you're someone's caregiver, I definitely think that you start to go through some form of grief of yourself. Like it's a definitely
Like a resentment almost?
No, it's just like you almost forget that like your relationship becomes caregiving. Did you eat today? What can I make you? Can I do this? We need to do this now. And it becomes like that role reversal rather than more like, hey, how was your day?
Yeah.
Can I bring you a snack? It's a little different. Now you're the person who has to worry. Role reversal. And I'm seeing it a lot now with like my mom and your mom's generation, the boomers, who are now taking care of their parents.
Yeah.
In that sense, like that's where you're seeing it, and that quality of life
Like
for your loved one as they get older.
Yeah.
And do we consider it? Do we consider the cost that goes into it? And then the quality of care. That's one thing I always say. Like,
the quality. Yeah.
who's going to take care of my mom better than me? Maybe my sister. But you know what I mean? Like, but also you run into financial responsibility, which also want to mention here is you have all this high cost, and we obviously can talk about this for so long. People setting themselves up for quality of care, like things that you could really be thinking about as you get older. Like what is your plan? Who's going to take care of you?
Yeah.
When do you start thinking about these? When do you, and it's also could be anxiety driving and fear driving.
Yeah.
Like too much anticipation can be hard, but it is something to talk about. It's something to have a conversation about.
At least get out, out loud to somebody to hear it, and then at least maybe they can, either remember to write it down. So when you do get older and forget, they're like, this is what they wanted.
This is what they would have wanted, or this is how they would have wanted handled, or like, obviously your finances is one thing, but also your personal wishes. How do you want? I will say that what I see personally in the funeral home and what I hear from a lot of other funeral directors and embalmers and just, you start to notice things. And like one thing that I noticed too is that the conditions of the decedents from the hospitals and stuff now, it has been changing, in my opinion, very much so. Like where I say like, how are you're pushing life-saving medication on a 97-year-old person. And yes, maybe the family is saying, do it, give him everything. But also like, where does the conversation of you're not going to live forever? Where is quality versus quantity? Where is the actual conversation?
Yeah.
Because it's like you're doing all this, and then by the time the funeral home gets the decedent, it's like, yes, we can embalm and we can do all these things, and we have all these little magic tricks, as we say, but still, did the body need to go through it? Then it's natural to die. I always think, it's like, how much can you bill out of somebody before the end of life? Like, I'm not saying, I'm not pointing it out, I'm just saying it just almost sometimes feels that way. But then they come to the funeral home and they're like, it's so expensive to die. But like, I'm sorry.
How much did
How much did you just pay? Wait, how much did you pay at the hospital? How much did it cost for you to give birth? You had a C-section, like without your insurance and everything. They always send the bill.
Yeah, so I remember with my first, we got a bill, obviously insurance paid for it, but I think it was like $40,000.
For a C-section?
Yeah. Plus the hospital stay, plus the anesthesia, plus, like with everything. Yeah, I think it was like $40,000, and that was, 8 years ago.
That's when I was in the hospital back in September, and I had pneumonia. I had a day and a half, and then I had to go back to the hospital. So without insurance, before my insurance and everything, was a $13,000 bill for a bed and some IVs and like a chest CT scan. It just, to me, it was just
overnight stay.
Yeah, still, that's like.
That's what I'm saying. You paying like hotel costs.
I feel like I could have hired a doctor. What if I could have got a hotel room for $3,000 and hired a personal doctor? Like, hey, can you meet me here?
Yeah.
And like, we can just do that. Like, I don't know. Like, and I get like, obviously these are buildings and they have taxes, like everything. It's wild to me that we can also gawk over funeral cost when are we taking a closer look at healthcare? It's almost like they're allowed to suck all the money out of you to say, hey, we're going to keep you alive for, and I'm not saying, okay, go to the doctor and find out, don't get treatment. That's not what I'm saying.
No, of course not.
But it's the reality too of someone's situation. And like, when do we sit and think about it? And there's not a right or wrong to it. There's no right or wrong, but to have the conversation with family to be like, listen, if I'm ever on life support, this is what I would want.
I think that makes a lot. I mean, listen, like, as somebody who's been through it, and my sister was in a terrible accident and was put on life support and was in a coma for 5 days, and those 5 days were terrifying.
I was there. It was horrible.
And and again, I'm thankful that I have you, that I have a little bit of knowledge, but. She is, she's okay. She's
still
okay.
alive.
But she was so young. It was just like, we never talked about it.
An accident like that.
Yeah, we never talked about it, but I know for a fact that like all of us would have kept her on everything for as long as we needed to. Like that was just, at least.
Keep going. But like, and then at what point too, and this also falls into people, families that I sit with that goes through this and then have to take their children off life support, and meet them. And this goes through the whole thing too, where, at what point when they say to you, hey, there's no more brain activity, they're brain dead, like, how long do you hold on? Do you believe there's hope? And then you see breakthrough miracle stories where people can learn to walk, and it's where is that? But the way I see it is like when you become of a certain point of age where you can have that conversation, I think it should be had.
Yeah.
I was inspired by Grey's Anatomy.
I never watched it.
I watched it a long time ago. I never finished it. And whatever, it just stuck with me. And I always say, if I'm ever on life support, you keep me on for 1 month. And if I show no signs of changes, take me off. But also, I believe that if I'm, brain dead, I don't want to live like that personally.
Same. I feel the same way.
Oh, no, I couldn't. But those are the tough conversations that people should have to. Like, my mom constantly tells me, don't ever put me in a nursing home. Does your mom say it?
My mom works in a nursing home.
She's like, put me in this one.
She's like, listen, these are going to be my...
I'm already hiring the nurses that are going to take care of me when I have to be there. Yeah. I, unfortunately, obviously, brain injuries in the family, right? We had quite a few brain injuries, and I remember when we had went through it with my mother, and it was like, for a split second there, she was just having this crazy, it was just crazy, but for a split second there, I was like, oh my gosh, what if this is what she'll be like for the rest of my life? Like, I know in my heart, I can care for so many, I don't know if I could do that. And that was a serious, and I just remember hearing my mom say, like, if don't ever put me in a nursing home, like, that would haunt me, but like, I wouldn't. And that was a conversation we had after everything got, thank God, everything was better. And we had a conversation, and it was like, I need you to see it from my point of view. Imagine that happened. I actually recently too, I said, what happens if you do get like Alzheimer's or you have dementia and you revert back to your first language and you're speaking Spanish? Like, is that, I'm like, what do I do? She was like, you better learn Spanish. Google Translate, I heard, is great. So
you got
that. And those are conversations, and I think that it's weird it's not just about finance, it's also about, what people would want and what you would see. One of my besties always says, like, no, I'm going to go to a nursing home, whatever, like, that's, it's cool. Like, I don't want to be anyone's burden. Like, that's their feelings on it. Like, that's great.
Yeah.
I think that everyone should have those types of
some sort of conversation.
Deep conversations. And I was looking up, that's what I was looking up, was the cost of healthcare, because the funeral cost, right? Yeah. So the average out-of-pocket cost for end-of-life care in the U.S. is $11,000 to $35,000, depending on length of illness, insurance, and, the hospital versus this. Where the average funeral costs between $7,000 to $12,000. So when you get into like end-of-life care, where you could be upwards to like $38,000 in your last 3 months between hospice cares, hospital stays, medical cares. And then you can end up, when that person dies, you have no money for a funeral. Mm-hmm. That's option one. Option two, though, you look at a funeral and you're like, well, that costs so much. It's like, well, look how much you paid. Like how could you compare the two?
To keep them on a machine or keep them,
keep them alive. And now, it's just the inevitable. And when it comes to the funeral, I'm not saying that you should get an expensive funeral because you paid a lot of money on health care. But it's the value in it too, what are you doing? My favorite is when people say like, oh, it's so expensive to die. I'm like, how much do you think it should cost? Not in like when I'm with families personally, but like friends and, when they talk, I'm like, how much do you think a funeral should cost? And how much do you think it should cost to have to give childbirth? $40,000? Oh my gosh. So my firstborn kid for 40 grand. I don't have kids, I can say that.
You're fine.
You know what I'm saying? So like, funeral costs, like, why would you?
I think this is all going back to the fact that like people are just so uncomfortable. If we made funerals and death just a normal conversation, the way we make a hospital stay, giving birth, putting someone, having to put somebody on life support or whatever, like that's a normal conversation. It's still sad, but it could be talked about. Like I had no problems calling you and saying like, oh, Jesse's on life support and this is what's going on. And we could talk about it and like whatever it cost, no problem. So why, it maybe just needs to be talked about more. And
but people think it's an awkward conversation to have or that's not going to happen. And it's not like you should set yourself up for the worst case scenario all the time, but it's an idea of your future. It's giving your children, your family that, and also setting yourself up. Because inevitably, like I say, you're gonna die, and if you're lucky enough, you're gonna get old. And if you're, at some point, yes, hopefully you can take care of yourself, and then one day you just don't. But if not, like there's a really good chance. And it's not even just people with the growing old. It's also just having a healthcare plan in case you get sick. No one is immune to getting cancer and disease and illness, and it could happen to any of us.
Like this,
accidents, like what happens, and it's having these conversations. It's talking about like, how would you want to have a funeral? Mm-hmm. All leads together, but like back to just go back to just the healthcare part really quick. When you're in the healthcare facility, I feel like, yes, hospice, like God bless them, they're angels, and they will talk about end of life, and when doctors will say there is no more treatment, but for how long do you rely on the healthcare system before they're honest with you? To say, this is going to happen at some point, whether, and I think that we hide death in society. And I think healthcare also aids in that at a very high cost. Like, again, even with like ICUs and things like that and situations you see, because just in general, as a society, we don't talk about death. We don't realize it is the inevitable. And there is things to consider.
It's inevitable.
What do I keep saying?
Inevitable?
Yeah. It's like when I say lapel pins.
Who?
Lapel?
Lapel?
Yeah. Yep. I learned that at work when I was like, oh yeah, the family dropped off these lapel pins. I was like, what? And I also do it with, this is a really funny story. We used to at work before like, all the fancy technology. We used to have to call like a service and you would record your voice with the service information and then they would replay it. Like, so if you were to call the funeral home, be like, what's the service information from Melissa? You would get my voice with the recording, and it sounded something like, Melissa will be in repose at the funeral home on Tuesday, January 12th from 4 to 7 p.m. But it would be my voice. Okay. I didn't always do accents.
I didn't know who the accent was.
Just sometimes I would do an accent. But I didn't know how to say Episcopal. So I was saying it would be at the Episcopal Church.
That's fair.
Episcopal?
That's fair, because I don't know how to say that word.
And I did that for like 6 months until one of the pallbearers called to figure out like what time they needed to be at work and they wanted to hear the service. And they were like, how do you say the church? I'm like, Episcopal.
Yeah. I worked for an attorney and I couldn't figure out appellate and I would call it appellate.
Oh, the appellate court.
The appellate division.
I think it's just natural to say things like that, but it's fine. I can't say ask. Oh.
Yes, you
ask,
can.
I said it. I usually say ask because it comes out that way.
You could do better.
Yeah.
Back to health care and the inevitable.
Yeah, well, all I'm saying is that I think that, it's something to talk about. It's something to consider. It's something to look at. And I think that looking at the cost of healthcare, thinking about your own future, your family's future, any responsibilities you may have, that includes your own children, you never know. And it's just look at it, let it roll around. And the next time someone complains about, the cost of funerals, people scamming, think about the cost of healthcare as well. And I think that's a big outside of the box thought. It's something I think about often, and it's something I prepare myself for. Like I know that it's going to be, hopefully I don't have to, but
at least you're prepared for
and
it.
I have a lot, I still keep continuing to educate myself. I try to, look into some stuff like that. And I think it's important.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that you're doing that because
Yeah, you're going to go create a will or something now. We should do that.
We should.
After we write each other's eulogies.
Oh, God.
It could be a good, bestie
Yeah, but
exercise.
you do this. I don't go to
I've
funerals.
never written a eulogy before.
But you listen to eulogies on a daily basis.
I did a eulogy for your dad a little bit.
You did?
Yeah, I spoke a lot. I wrote some things down. I picked some hand poems. I remember that. So it was
good.
kind of, but I didn't really talk.
I remember I got asked to go up at Georgie's funeral, and I couldn't come up with words. Like, I just blanked out there. I was so sad. But Niall's eulogy was incredible.
Yeah, it was
so
true. Everything
God.
was.
Thank God.
We'll have to practice our eulogy skills. Well, we're at our own. We'll see where we're at.
We'll see.
Well, until then, I hope you like, comment, subscribe.
Share it.
Do all the things. And find Funeral Babe on Instagram and TikTok and leave comments and do all this stuff and share with all your friends because this is all good stuff. And we'll see you next week.
I love it. Thank you.
Mwah, mwah, mwah.
Oh, did I really just blow a kiss?
You did.
I copied you.
I love it.
That's not me. It's never going to happen again.
Bye.